A lot has happened since Notre Dame played Ohio State in the national championship game. New coaches, key transfers, and a full spring practice slate. Today, Luke Smith and I are taking a step back to recap the biggest developments of the offseason so far and figure out what really matters heading into summer. Plus, we're going to hand out our spring superlatives from spring MVP to biggest surprise and the biggest question mark heading into summer. We're breaking it down right here on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018. Now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and I am thrilled to have you here on Thursday, May 1st, and thank you for kicking off the month of May by making this your first listen of the day. Quick reminder, if you are enjoying the show, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or follow on your favorite podcast app. And if you're feeling generous, drop a like or 5-star review. It really helps grow the show. As for today's show, I'm really excited because I'm going to be joined once again by my good friend and former co-host Luke Smith to take a big picture look at Notre Dame's offseason so far. Yeah, spring practice is behind us, but there has been so much more going on these past few months. So we're going to hand out superlatives for the entire offseason, from MVP and biggest surprise to biggest offseason win and the most important question heading into the summer. It's all on the table, so let's bring him in. All right, Luke Smith is here to discuss everything we have seen and learned this offseason for Notre Dame football. We like to hand out awards together on this show, but this time we're going to crown our spring superlatives. It's kind of like senior superlatives in high school, but hopefully not as awkward. So, Luke, did you happen to win a senior superlative when you were in high school?
You know, not that I recall. If I did, clearly it wasn't super memorable or just, I guess, impressive, because that's probably something I'd be boasting about a decade later. But I can't say that I did. Did you?
I did not either. I was thinking about it. Which one would I have won? And I mean, I guess at the time they didn't have most likely to start a podcast and talk by himself in his guest bedroom every single week. If that had been around, and I'm sure that absolutely exists in high schools today, like most likely to start a podcast, then I probably would have won that one. But unfortunately, I wasn't winning like most athletic or any of the good ones.
Yeah, maybe like, I don't know, back then most likely to host a radio show or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. That would have been the 2014 equivalent of that. But
I went to a nerd high school, so it was like most likely to become president, most likely to work on the Hill. Like, honestly, they were kind of lame. So maybe it's a good thing that I didn't win one.
Yeah, the only ones that I really remember were like, there was like most likely to become dean of my high school, and those were usually the kids that won that were usually the kids that were always in trouble as a joke. They would win. So that's kind of the only one that I really remember being awarded.
We also had biggest flirt, which was always pretty controversial every year.
Yeah,
it was like
that's
bad to win that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like looking back 20 years later and you're like, your mom won biggest flirt. It's like,
yeah, it's not great.
Why? So, yeah, there's all kinds of weird ones at my high school. But today, we're not doing senior superlatives. We're doing spring superlatives to try to just do a little off-season reset, because a few months have passed. Spring practice is in the rear view. And I think most of like the major things have already happened, knock on wood, and it's not like a repeat of the 2013 offseason. But I think it's a good time now as the calendar flips to summer to go over some of the biggest developments that have happened over the first few months. So we're going to start off with the biggest off-season win. Off-seasons, like games on the schedule, are about wins and losses. So what do you think has been the biggest win for Notre Dame this offseason?
I think I'm going to say no major injuries suffered during spring. And obviously the way that it's structured now, where guys are more or less on pitch counts, helps that. But we've seen freak injuries happen in fall camp and in spring camp, even for guys that probably weren't going full go. So the fact that there are no major injuries to report, either from camp or from the spring game itself, that's a positive, because you want your team at full strength going into the summer.
And not even just major injuries too. Like last year, the Riley Leonard thing, even though he wasn't out for a super long time, he ended up missing all of spring practice. And I do think that affected Notre Dame specifically at the start of the season, because he clearly did not develop that chemistry with the wide receivers. But admittedly, that's kind of a boring one, but guess what? I'm picking a boring one too, because I'm just saying the retention on the staff and the roster. I thought about maybe throwing a recruiting one in there, like an honorable mention recruiting surge in the month of April, but I think they need a little bit more time with that. Like as good as this past month has been, I don't know if it's like the biggest win of the offseason, but the fact that they were able to keep all the guys that they really wanted to keep on the roster. And yeah, the biggest loss is obviously the fact that they lost the Broyles Award winner, Al Golden, to the NFL, but they replaced him with Chris Ash. Seems like a solid hire. And then you could make the case that they upgraded at the running back coach position because like they lose Dylan McCullough, who obviously did a lot of great things for Notre Dame, but then they go out and they hire Jaylen Strowman from Penn State. Like, if anything, that's a one-for-one replacement. And the fact that the spring transfer portal window passed and they're still in great shape, like that is a huge win for Notre Dame. It's not as flashy as bringing in a Riley Leonard or a Sam Hartman or poaching Mike Denbrock from LSU, but it's critical to sustain the momentum that they built over the course of this past season.
Definitely. And I think that it's funny too, because a couple months ago, it seemed like everybody was really, really in the dumps about recruiting. And I think you've definitely seemed to take in this opinion on this. I've definitely tried to take this perspective, is that recruiting's just not worth getting worked up about because these things seem to work themselves out. And it definitely has. And now you are seeing a couple months later that post-national championship run bump. And it's going to be really exciting to see where this goes from here.
Right. And when Notre Dame was in that slow period, it was at the same time that they had to basically reassemble their personnel department. Like, obviously things weren't going to be firing on all cylinders when they lose their general manager, and their general manager is poaching a couple people from the personnel staff. So it's not a surprise. Now it seems like they have figured things out and they have things rolling on the recruiting trail. But I don't know about you, but I've said it before, like I was stunned at the fact that so few guys entered the portal, not just after the winter, but in the spring cycle too. Like, do you feel the same way?
It's almost strange, to be totally honest with you. And it's obviously a good thing that you're keeping important guys and key depth pieces, but I'm of the belief that roster cycling is almost a healthy thing. Like some of these guys that I know Notre Dame's never really going to be in a position where they're outwardly cutting guys like some other schools might be, but I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but there are some guys on the team that I think you can all probably think of who they might be, that I almost feel like they're just sticking around to get the degree, and they've kind of come to grips with the fact that they're not going to play again. And I'm not sure how good of a thing that is. I would almost just rather them be gone. But that's not my job to sort out or really even know that. But that's just kind of my perspective on it.
But you're talking about the guys who are like
the bottom,
100th and
bottom.
above. Yeah.
Yes.
100th and below on the roster. Like, I don't think they're really getting in the way of anything. They're just basically scouting guys.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think that just like coaching turnover, like from a assistant perspective, can be healthy. I think roster turnover generally is a sign of a healthy place because you have guys that want to play and there's nowhere for them to play.
To me, the most surprising thing is literally just the running back position. Like, Jaylen Strowman went out of his way basically to say, hey, look, I'm really only playing 3 guys maximum. And Notre Dame has Jeremiah Love, who's certainly going to get the ball a lot, Jadarian Price, Aeneas Williams, 1, 2, and 3 on last season's team, as well as Keidron Young, who's surging. And then you got Jabron Payne at 5, who actually looked good this spring, probably good enough to start somewhere else, but he elects to stay. And it's like, guys, there's only one ball. But hey, I mean, if it's just about getting the degree, and maybe specifically in the case of Jabron Payne, he's waiting to get his degree and then enter the portal. Don't know how that works, but hey, I think that is by far the biggest win, that they were able to keep all the guys that they wanted to. Now let's get into the spring MVP from spring practice. They had 15 practices. We got to see the spring game, obviously, when everyone was out there on the field. And then there was the jersey scrimmage as well, where the media was able to see an entire scrimmage, basically. So who do you think was the spring MVP?
It's CJ Carr, and I'm sure by now you've all either have watched the spring game or watched the highlights from it. But based on that, and really just based on the departure of Steve Angeli, I'm not sure how there can be another answer, because for a lot of folks and a lot of folks on the beat, there was this notion, this presumption that Steve Angeli was going to be the starter going into the year. And yeah, CJ Carr might take the job at some point, but I mean, certainly not this spring. The fact that Angeli left after the spring, I think, rings very loudly on just how impressive CJ Carr must have been this spring.
The fact that he was the 4th-string quarterback last year and now he's in pole position to be the starting quarterback is really impressive. He didn't do all of that in the winter and spring, but he did a lot of it because he missed basically the entire fall rehabbing an elbow injury that he suffered in practice. So you think about all the reps he missed and the fact that it just really didn't stunt his development, certainly didn't affect his chances to win the starting quarterback job. You could make the case that Kenny Minchie was like the biggest surprise, or like certainly one of the biggest risers of spring, because a lot of people were counting him out. Now he's firmly in that two-man quarterback competition. But I'm with you. I'm also picking CJ Carr. He looked so good in that spring game. And, it's funny, like when he committed to Notre Dame, it was years ago, right? And he was a junior in high school. You're thinking like, man, it's probably going to be a while. Like you don't really get too excited about it in the moment because you're like, he's not going to take a snap at Notre Dame for 4 years maybe. But now it looks like we're getting close to the CJ Carr era starting. And even though I have my concerns about a young quarterback, especially starting on the road at Miami, the way that he has flashed and the fact that the coaching staff seems to be so confident in him to the point where they lose Steve Angeli, they might have even told him that he should leave. I'm just speculating here. The fact that he's already put himself in that position to me makes him so impressive. That's why he's a spring MVP.
No doubt. And it's going to be really exciting to see. I mean, this is, of course, assuming that he does, in fact, win the job come fall time, which I think we're now all making that assumption, which maybe the one thing we learned about the quarterback race from the spring is maybe not to make assumptions, but I think that one feels pretty safe. But it's going to be really exciting to watch that take off this fall.
Luke and I still have a lot more spring superlatives to hand out, including the biggest surprise of the offseason so far. But first, a word from Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Next up, we got biggest surprise. Who did you pick?
I'll let Tay Johnson here, and I spoke about roster turnover and guys leaving because they want to play and there's not a place for them. And I think the fact that you had Kenny Urlacher transfer because he felt he never really got a chance to start is actually more so just a large spelling of how much of a move Tay Johnson had to make this spring. We knew that Luke Talish was going to compete. We knew obviously that they had like Ben Minnick still back there. They've got Don Schuler at the other safety spot. And then, of course, they've got Jaylen Strowman, who did not participate this spring back there as well. But Tay Johnson's a guy who missed almost all of last season with injury. So for him to be a guy we heard about frequently this spring was significant to me. And it really just makes that safety room even more loaded than it already was.
I'm going to pick another young defensive back, but I'm picking Carson Hobbs and his rise throughout this offseason. Like, look, hand up. I thought Carson Hobbs was going to be the next Jaden Mickey, a very confident cornerback who sort of gets overshadowed by the other cornerback in his class who ends up being an all-timer. Like in the case of Jaden Mickey, it was Benjamin Morrison, who we had actually heard quite a bit about Jaden Mickey in his first spring practice with the team. Then Benjamin Morrison joined the team that summer. He ends up starting in that game against Ohio State. And now in this case, like Hobbs and Leonard Moore both joined the team at the same time, but then Leonard Moore is a fresh and All-American by the end of the year. And I thought Hobbs might get lost in the shuffle and maybe be a factor later on. But now he has had such a great spring that it's totally changed his trajectory. Like he might compete for playing time this season, whether it be as the first corner off the bench, maybe he gets some reps at nickel, or if Christian Gray is more ups and downs, maybe they trust him to go out there. Like he is just that good, and I did not see that coming.
Yeah, and I think the Jaden Mickey comparison is apt because Carson Hobbs was talking about himself an awful lot this spring too, saying how gifted he was and how athletic he was. And Jaden Mickey talked a lot for a guy who wasn't very good. So it's good to see that it seems like his ability is backing up his talk, and I'm sure they're going to find him some snaps because, as we know, Mike Mickens isn't afraid to sit corners for a drive over the course of the year in regular season games and get them some rest. So he's going to play significant snaps, I think, this year.
Yeah, and if you had told me that a couple months ago, I would have been stunned. So honestly, great for Carson Hobbs because not only is he a loud talker, but he has the play to back it up, and he also has elite traits. I mean, he made the claim that he's faster than Jeremiah Love. I don't know about all of that, but for him to even make that to the press means he's probably close to the top on the team. I would assume, or maybe he's just completely full of it, but I don't think that's the case. I think he's going to have an impact this year one way or another. All right, next up, we got best newcomer. So this could be a freshman or a transfer who made a big impression.
So I've got Will Pauling here, and this is an interesting answer or conclusion that I came to because he's a guy who we thought was going to be fairly limited in the spring, but I think we saw him a little bit more than we expected to in practice, and he made plays in practice. And I think more importantly, Mike Brown spoke of him as the receiver in that room who knows his system the best. And that's, of course, a reference to the fact that he played for Mike Brown at both Wisconsin and Cincinnati, and he just instills a lot of confidence as more of a security blanket to move the chains on third down or, just pick up some yards. And he comes in with a ton of production that I think are going to lead to some success as a receiver 4 or 5, whatever it is this year. And that's not a place that Notre Dame was in the last, half decade where we weren't thinking about receivers 4 and 5. We were trying to find one. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, the fact that he had 74 receptions a couple years ago when he's with Wisconsin, that's a staggering number. I'm actually going back right now trying to find the last time a Notre Dame wide receiver had over 70 catches. I mean, you go back to 2015, Will Fuller only had 62. Now, granted, he was going deep.
It's probably Michael Floyd.
Yeah, I think it's probably Michael Floyd as well. I'm getting research on that right now. But
Maybe
I think
TJ Jones? Yeah, I don't know. But
that's a good pick, though, because going in, like you said, I think even Notre Dame was like, yeah, he's going to be very limited, but then he was out there making some plays. He didn't really have a great spring game. Now, I don't think that's going to, completely change what he can do at Notre Dame. But the fact that Notre Dame brought in a receiver who had that level of production in college for a Power 4 program, not only that, a Power 2 program, really, because it's a Big Ten school. Chris Mitchell had a lot of yards at Florida International, and Bo Collins had some nice stats, but none of those compared to Will Pauling, and he's not even the main transfer receiver that they brought in. So I have high hopes for him. I also have high hopes for Elijah Burus. He's my best newcomer, and I had zero expectations for any of the early enrollee freshman wide receivers. Yeah. I was admittedly really down on that class overall. I thought that Burus was the only one who didn't feel like a reach, who could eventually be an impact player later on. I mean, maybe Scrap Richardson becomes something and Jerome Bettis Jr. as well. But Burus seemingly had the best shot, and I was just not expecting him to do it right away. He had a really good spring practice, and credit to him, he took advantage of a lot of opportunities that I don't think most early enrollee freshmen typically get, but considering the fact that Fields was not really a part of the team, Greathouse was going to be limited because they're going to rest him, Faison's limited while he's cross-training with lacrosse, Pauling was limited because of his injury, same with Micah Gilbert. So now Elijah Burus is out there getting reps with the ones, and he capitalized. So I still don't know what his role is going to be on this year's team. Mike Brown likes to run a 6-man rotation. We know who the top 4 are, but honestly, those last 2 spots are up for grabs. I'll be surprised if he gets a ton at the 5th spot. I think that's going to be Micah Gilbert, but he's going to be playing a lot more this season than I thought he was going to.
I agree, and I think it's significant how much they targeted him in both that Jersey scrimmage and also in the spring game because it shows that they clearly have faith in him. And I wasn't expecting him to be much of a producer this year, and as you're stating, he still might be at the back end of that rotation, but that's significant to me. And hey, we can always hope that he looks a little young. Maybe he's still got a little bit of a growth spurt in him, and he can jump an inch or two and get close to his dad's height. Because if he has that, then man, he might really be a player one day.
I'm just going to be honest. Part of my perception of him when he stepped on campus had to do with the fact that he wore a tie that was 8 sizes too big at his commitment announcement. Do you remember that picture?
It was huge.
I feel bad docking the kid. And I also thought he was a lot skinnier than he was, but he's listed at 182. And for a player who's 6 feet, that's pretty solid for an early freshman. So tie aside, I think the future is really bright for Elijah Burus. This next category, though, is a bit interesting. The most curious, like player you're still unsure about or you're watching closely after this spring.
For me, this one's pretty easy because it turned out we didn't see this guy at all, and that's Jaylen Strowman. It's strange to me that Strowman required surgery after missing essentially the entire season at Virginia Tech last year with an injury. He got hurt in the first game against Vanderbilt. And it just raises some questions. And I realized that Riley Leonard, when he came to Notre Dame, had to have another procedure as well. But that I think that can be explained a little bit more easily. This one, I'm struggling with. What are we supposed to believe? Is Virginia Tech's training and rehab department just that bad that they couldn't identify this? Did he know he was going to transfer that whole time, so he didn't try to rehab it there? And I'm just a bit dubious because Notre Dame's history with Virginia Tech transfers, Caleb Smith, not great. So, who knows? Might mean nothing, but it's just a little curious to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair considering how long he's been out. It's been, since the start of September of 2024. He's not really played any level of football. I don't think he was expecting to have another surgery when he got on campus in Notre Dame. And the thing is, when you have one shoulder injury, unfortunately, those seem to mount. Notre Dame has had decent luck with bringing in transfers with an injury history. Like Jordan Clark was dealing with injuries the entire season prior to coming over to Notre Dame. Thomas Harper, same deal with him. I think he missed the entire spring while he was recovering from shoulder surgery. So maybe there's just a little bit more confidence in the Notre Dame medical staff. But I don't know what it is. I just feel oddly confident that Jaylen Strowman is going to come in and contribute. But I think that's totally fair to be skeptical.
Yeah, I hope you're right, but it's just strange. That's all I'm saying.
Mine might be my pick here might be a little bit of a reach, and I might get some pushback for this, but I think it's going to be Eli Riden. So I know he looked good in the spring. He did. And the reviews on him have been really positive. And what he did in the spring game, he had 2 catches for 21 yards, but he looked really good with the ball in his hands. He had the biggest play of the Jersey scrimmage the week prior. But I don't know what is. I'm still a bit skeptical. And I think part of this has to do with the expectations for him. Like, he has to be really good this season for this Notre Dame offense to really do the things that we all hope it will, because, even though they want to run more 11 personnel under Mike Denbrock, you still need a really good tight end. I mean, it's Notre Dame, for God's sakes. And I just really want to see it. We saw it in glimpses in the spring, but I have no doubt that he could be a serviceable quality starting tight end for Notre Dame. But can he be the next really good Notre Dame tight end? That part I'm still a little bit unsure of. And I think he had such high hopes coming out of high school, being a borderline 5-star recruit, and due to injuries, through no fault of his own, his career has been a little bit up and down. But now he has this opportunity. I like what I'm hearing about him, but I still just need to see it to believe it on Saturdays.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. And the comparison I'll make, it's not a 1-to-1, is I had my doubts about Jack Kaiser going into last year. What does he look like as a full-time player? Because he had been such a rotational guy for the first 5 years, basically, of his college career. He played a little bit more maybe at different points early on. And I think that there's a similar path here where Eli Riden has to be almost an every down tight end now. And can he do that? Jack Kaiser was able to do that. He got drafted this year as a 24-year-old, linebacker. So if that's any indication, maybe Eli Riden can also put this together. He has all the ability in the world. It's just time to put it all together over the course of a season and every snap.
Okay, this next one is future star, someone with clear long-term potential that you just saw him and you're like, yep, that dude's going to be it.
Bryce Young. He looks way older and bigger, by the way, since January alone. When they were interviewing him during the Blue Gold game, it was kind of one of those, who is that guy? That does not look like the Bryce Young that we saw at the back end of last year, who was already making plays all over the field. His dad's a Hall of Famer. This kind of feels like a surefire, superstar.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've been saying he could have a Stephon Tuitt level sophomore season, and he goes in that spring game. They were limiting him. Throughout the spring, even though he wasn't even a full-time starter this past year. I think that shows you the level of expectation this coaching staff has for him and what he can do this season. But he still is able to get a sack and 4 tackles in the spring game, despite not being out there that long. That defensive line, which is felt like a big concern going into the season, and now you look at what they have on the edges with Young, Burnham coming back, Botello, Traore, if he's healthy, he could be another stud. Like, if Traore and Bryce Young live up to their potential this season, which is a big if, especially considering that Traore is coming off an injury, that's like a college football playoff level, at least on the edges, right? Maybe not the full defensive line, but if those two guys take that next step, it could be scary for opposing offenses.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see it happen because, that would be just terrific.
All right, late bloomer, a veteran or a role player who you think is on the rise?
So there's a couple of candidates I think you could have here, and I guess I just love the safeties today because I'm going to say Luke Talich here. I think he had a great spring, positioned himself to truly battle Jaylen Strowman for that other starting safety spot. At a minimum, he's going to play a bunch, and this is a guy that came in as a preferred walk-on, earned a scholarship quickly, made some plays last year, the pick six against Florida State, really became a stalwart on special teams, and I think he's going to play a lot on defense this year and position himself to have a nice role for this Notre Dame team.
You really are on the safeties today. Tay Johnson, biggest surprise. Luke Talich, late bloomer. And then most curious, Jaylen Strowman. So I got to ask, who do you think is going to be the starting safety next to Adon Schuler this year? Because it seems like you're a little bit torn.
I think it's going to be Luke Talich, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're right. If it's just talent and production, then it should be Jaylen Strowman. But I'm just not confident yet that he's going to be 100%. So that's sort of why I'm leaning towards Talich.
It would basically be Rod Hurd 2.0. And then for Tay Johnson, you think that he's probably going to have to sit one more year, maybe make an impact on special teams. So you're kind of thinking of him making a big impact next year?
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, Notre Dame, depending on what happens with Adon Schuler this season, I was kind of trying to think about next year, like where would they have to go into the transfer portal? Obviously, so many things are going to happen over the course of the next several months that will determine that. But I was like, okay, if Adon Schuler has a great season, leaves for the NFL, would they go back to the transfer portal for a safety? They might not have to if Tay Johnson ends up taking that next step like you were suggesting he could. Definitely think that's possible. Now, for a veteran who, if he does take that next step, it could be massive, it's Jaylen Sneed. And it's actually kind of crazy to think about Sneed being a senior. Maybe that's just us getting old because I remember his first spring practice 4 years ago. He was a 5-star early enrollee who everyone was super excited about. The first 5-star big Marcus Freeman guy, like he's not going to Notre Dame. If not for Marcus Freeman, you're thinking this is going to be the player that brings in the new era of Notre Dame football. But then he got on campus and he wasn't even 200 pounds and he was a linebacker. Now he's 238 pounds. He's much more consistent. Marcus Freeman was raving about what he did in spring practice, not just in terms of his ability, but the effort and the attention to detail in every single practice is huge. And now I'm starting to think that like there's a chance that Jaylen Sneed could basically follow the Chase Claypool career arc, come in with a ton of hype. The first couple years aren't that great due to some immaturity factors, but then really just close it out strong. Chase Claypool had an amazing season back in 2019. And if Jaylen Sneed is able to replicate anything close to that this season, then Notre Dame all of a sudden is like one of the best linebacking cores in the entire country.
Yeah, and let's just hope then he has a better pro career than Chase Claypool did, at least after his rookie year. But yeah, I think that possibility is certainly there. This is a guy that 9-8 months ago, whenever last September was, I didn't think would probably still be here.
After the Louisville game, I think you and I both said that might be the last time we see Jaylen Sneed.
Like we thought he might hit the portal that week, and look how much changed. He made a lot of plays in the playoff, and now he's positioning himself well to have just a terrific senior season.
All right, last one we have here. The most important non-quarterback summer question, because we all know the biggest question for Notre Dame going into the summer is who will emerge as the starting quarterback. But what is going to be the storyline that does not involve the quarterback that you think is going to define the months between now and the start of fall camp?
I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this, and it's sort of already been answered. I think the group's going to be good regardless, but I definitely still have a lot of questions on which 5 are going to start at which positions on the offensive line. There's a lot of talent in that room. You have a bunch of guys that started in the playoffs last year over various games due to injuries. Pretty much everybody, not everybody, but I would say 4 out of the 7 guys that are realistically competing for starting jobs started a playoff game last year. That's a lot. And then, like more specifically, where's Garby going to play? I mean, that's a guy that we thought was going to be kind of the next great Notre Dame offensive lineman. And now is it a question, did this injury really set him back? And does he not have a chance now? Is it going to be Anthony Knapp's job to lose a tackle? So what the heck? Well, I can't even think of his name. All right, I got it now. With Ashton Craig starting at center, because at one point I thought maybe Knapp would play center. Seems like they're pretty tied into him playing tackle, and so is Kirby going to have to wait another year? That's going to be interesting to see because that's a guy that I think we probably all thought was going to start somewhere, and that might not be the case. These are good problems to have, but there's still some things that need to be sorted out.
When I lie in bed at night, looking at the ceiling, thinking about the season to come, the one question that keeps running through my mind is, where is Gerby going to play? It might be the biggest question. Maybe that's it. Simple as that.
It's looming.
The other one I have is, can Notre Dame land a top 5 class? And I think that by the start of the season, we're going to know if that's a possibility because they're about to enter a really important stretch. Like right now, all the coaches are on the road. They got a couple guys who are about to commit that'll put them like firmly at the top. But will they be able to close? It's like the age-old question. It felt impossible a couple months ago. You and I were talking about this class offline. We're like, could it suck maybe? Like, would this be the first time a team went to the national championship and just couldn't do anything on the recruiting trail? But that has certainly changed in the time since then. And I think it's a legitimate possibility. We've been talking about this literally for years. Can Notre Dame sign a top 5 class? And they have just been on a tear as of late. And if they keep this up, they could do what they never did under Chad Bowden, and that is sign a top 5 class. So that's definitely going to be something I'm watching out for these next few months.
You and pretty much everybody else who hates Chad Bowden. So that's quite a few people these days.
That list is growing.
Yeah.
That list is growing. And I think it's a lot of people inside the Goog. All right, that's all we have for you. Luke, you got any final thoughts before we wrap this up? But now, summer is almost here. What do you got in store?
I got not a whole lot. I'm already excited for when fall camp kicks up, which I guess will probably be sometime late July, maybe, because the first game is in the end of August. Whenever it is, I'm already looking forward to that, which is strange for this time of year. Normally, still kind of want a little bit of time off. Definitely, summer will be fun, but this is going to be a fun team to watch next fall.
One thing I got for you that I didn't mention: how are you feeling about the men's hoop squad?
Not good. Not good.
All right, we'll end it there.
Yeah.
All right, talk to you soon, Luke.
All right, peace.
All right, that's going to do it for this episode, and that's a wrap on another week of Locked On Irish. By the time you are listening to this, I'm going to be in Louisville, Kentucky for the 151st running of the Kentucky Derby. If you're a longtime listener of the show, or if you know me personally, you know that this is my favorite weekend of the year every single year, and I could not be more excited to take some time off and enjoy a long weekend back in my hometown for Derby weekend. I'm going to be back on Tuesday of next week, but in the meantime, remember, if you're watching along on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give the video a thumbs up. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, go ahead and follow the show and leave a 5-star review. If you enjoy the content, it really helps us grow the show and keep the daily coverage going all year long. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you on Tuesday.